All right. We got a few people here. How's everybody doing? Hop in the chat. Tell us that you're here. Tell us where you are, what your function is. Not your function as a human, like your function at work. Function as a human is, I don't know. What's the meaning of life, Alejandro? Is that what we're covering today?
Yes. And we're going to use data to back it up.
And we're bringing data to back it up.
We're bringing great data.
Data on the meaning of life.
If only we had that.
Oklahoma. Nice. UK. See a UK. That's cool.
Nice. Joining in after work.
South Carolina. Argentina. Washington State. Rhode Island. Atlanta. Malibu, California. I'm from close to Washington State, and it is very annoying to always have to say Washington State and not just to get to say Washington. Austin, Texas. Cool. We're just giving everybody like maybe another minute or so to trickle in. India. Got an India here. Alejandro, where are you joining us from?
Right now, I am in Santo Domingo, the Dominican Republic.
Oof. Sounds nice.
It is. What about you, Jan?
Utah. It's less exciting. It's way less exciting in Utah.
Depends what you want, man. You know, you got mountains and you got beautiful scenery. Here we just have beaches.
So real quick, if you guys would chat in, like maybe some of the stuff you're hoping to get out of today. We're going to cover a couple common e-commerce myths. But are there some things you're hearing from people or you're seeing that you're like, is this true? Is this real? And you know, what's on your mind? I guess that's a good way to sum it up. What's on your mind? Use that one a lot. I'll throw that in the chat and we'll get started here in a second. All right. You ready? You ready to go, Alejandro?
Whenever you are.
All right. Let's do this thing. So, welcome to the show, everybody. Welcome to the webinar. This is Ecom Mythbusters, the inside scoop on how the top brands are driving growth. You can all read, you can see that there. We're just going to talk about some of the most common myths that we're seeing. We're going to either confirm them or bust them. This is who we are. That's me, John. I'm on the top right there. Alejandro's in the bottom right. We are the professional services consultants for Triple Whale. Professional services, just like it's a fancy tech way to say consulting, coaching. We help people with their marketing strategy. We help brands build their growth strategies that work with Triple Whale. So we do 15 to 25 calls per week with brands. A lot of them are new brands. Some of them are like ongoing, probably half and half, maybe ongoing and new brands. Triple Whale has the data on 11,000 plus stores, 11,000 and counting. Alejandro and I both have a lot of experience in high-level marketing roles, either leading growth teams, running performance marketing agencies. I have my own brand, all the good stuff. There's some of our logos on the right that we've worked with, you know, the obligatory logo slide here. But yeah, we've led performance marketing at some agencies. We've been in VP of growth or CMO roles at 8-figure brands. I'm a brand owner myself. Alejandro has led growth at a major brand as well. And we've managed a lot of spend ourselves, like actually in there pushing the buttons ourselves, as well as overseeing and consulted on a lot of spend as well. So that's kind of our background, who we are. This is what we're going to get into today. We're going to do a little back and forth. We're going to talk about creative testing methods. You know, how should we be testing new creatives, sourcing and testing them. We're going to talk about campaign types, specifically Advantage Plus campaigns, Advantage Plus shopping campaigns. We're going to talk about cost caps, the holy gospel of the cost cap. We're going to talk about what creatives are working right now. Just kind of go over some of the creatives we see working pretty well in accounts. And then we're going to go over PMax, Performance Max in Google versus manual shopping, and other quote unquote other channels. I like where we did that. If it's not Meta and it's not Google, it's an other channel. what we call it, supplementary channels. And then we're going to get into some Q&A. So hopefully, I know we got about an hour. I think we can probably get through a lot of the stuff we have here in less time than that. So as you guys have questions, put them into the chat. We do have someone behind the scenes, Daniela, gathering your questions, and we'll get to your questions in a Q&A section at the end. You ready to do this thing, man?
Yes.
I think, are you first? Yeah, you're first.
I'm first. So let's go over campaign types for a bit. And this is basically these are basically the campaign types that I'm seeing inside of Facebook. And when I see the big brands running, I can already tell you in advance that there's like no sexy strategies. It's actually quite simple. The campaign types that I'm seeing are kind of a mix of the classic with a bit of the new. And this begins obviously with ABO. There was a time when a lot of people still and were testing instead of CBOs, but I'm seeing some of the biggest brands just go back to regular manual ABO testing. Now, the brands that are doing this sort of approach are brands that have a lot of creative output. Like if you're outputting a lot of creative that needs to be tested on a weekly basis, then ABO testing is perfect because it lets you manage all that volume at scale and obviously it lets you keep the handle on profitability while you do so. So the way that brands typically scale using this method is they'll have a bunch of outperformers that'll definitely hit it out of the park, but they'll have a bunch of above average tests in there as well. So it's, as John likes to say, it's a decision about the right ones to obviously cut, which are going to be tests you're going to be removing, but the money is made in keeping a bunch of above average ones and then obviously scaling the outperformance. And I can tell you there's not that many outperformance, but if you stack above average or decent test results one on top of the other, the scale becomes quite significant. But again, this is only for brands that have that creative output. If you don't have that creative output and you can't run, let's say, 5 to 10 tests per week, then ABO testing might not be the best option. And by test, I mean creative concepts. So let's say one type of creative with 3 variations of that concept. Now, the next type of campaign that I see absolutely killing it across clothing, jewelry, anything that is wearable is ASC. We don't see a lot of talk about this, but ASC is just performing insanely well. And if you set it up right, then brands typically can use this as a way to get around the fact that they don't have much creative to test, while also leveraging Facebook's machine learning and AI capabilities. So the way we typically see and the way I the way I consult clients to set it up and the way I see the best results are you'd have one ASC per offer. By offer, I mean, let's say you sell rings, necklaces, and earrings. You want to have one ASC per offer. So one ASC for rings, one for jewelry, one for necklaces. And then you'd want to start with at least 15 to 20 creatives for that specific offer. You want to give it as much creative at the front as possible so that then you don't have to do a lot of the management work. You can just go in turning on and off every week and then re-adding the creative that was missing. So if you started with 15, let's say the week after that, let's say one of them is not performing, you can kill that one and obviously replace it with one new one, but you don't have to add in bulk, which is why creative testing with ASC is great if you just start with a huge upfront bulk of creative. So it's great for brands, like I said, that don't have a lot of creative. And as long as you set it up right, give it enough budget, depending obviously on your AOV. But if you start with a good batch, then you're good to go. What's the difference between ASC and broad and CBO?
Yeah.
You can, I'll
Yeah,
continue.
you can roll back to that. We can roll back to that one.
All right, so CBOs. Honestly, I don't see two CBOs performing too well. Like ASC is closely replacing CBO as the main scaling slash evergreen campaign. Most brands have an ABO and an ASC, and I'm slowly seeing CBO. I'm not saying it's dying down, but I'm just seeing ASC outperform CBO when it comes to scaling. Um, we're also seeing way better results with the ASC than with the CBOs. So consolidation from what I'm seeing now involves a mix of ASC and ABO. And in the case that you don't want to do ABO because it's just too much, you don't have the creative, just ASC. So yeah, that's the rundown of what I'm seeing working. I know there's not a lot of talk about ASC, but if you're running if you're running a clothing brand or a jewelry brand, and you have really good product photography, and you can just give it a lot of variety, ASC will absolutely kill it for your brand.
Yeah. All right. So next up, let's talk about creative testing. So the questions that you put in there. So I saw, Ryan, that you put in there. what's the difference between ASC and using a broad audience in like a CBO or ABO. We'll just get through everything and then circle back to questions. Let's kind of do it that way. Because I think, yeah, we've got some thoughts on that. All right. Basically, Facebook ads in 2024 is like 4 to 5 plays, and it's all about how you creative test and how you scale. And so this is kind of like play number one. Play number one is the play you run like roughly 50% of the time. This is the run up the middle of running meta ads, or I don't know this. We got an international audience here, so I don't know the soccer version of that, but basketball, it's the pick and roll of running Facebook ads here. So you got one creative testing campaign that's an ABO, and there are wrinkles here. This could be a CBO. There are variations, but one creative testing campaign. You launch weekly you launch hand sets into it every week. You target broad. You use dynamic creatives or posts, doesn't matter, but you theme them. So every ad set, if you're using a dynamic creative and you're using 4 creatives in there and a couple copy variations and a headline variation or whatever, there's a theme, right? So they're all themed the same. Whether they're using the same angle or the same model, whatever it is, you just choose a theme and you say, okay, all of these creatives are basically variations of each other. I don't care which one wins. So that's the creative testing campaign. And then there's a scaling campaign, which is ASC, Advantage Plus Shopping campaign, or CBO, Advantage Plus Shopping campaign, taking over more in like many SKU for like many SKU stores lately. And there's one ad set inside that scaling campaign. It's a broad ad set, and it has all the post IDs from winning creatives. So this is play one. There's different variations of it. So different wrinkles from in play one, like whether you use a CBO or an ABO here, or whether you actually do a little bit of audience testing or whatever. But this is the core concept, is that you force spend to creative tests. So play one is the concept of forcing spend to creative tests and scaling your winners. The upside here is that you get to find your next banger. Like you will test more creatives more quickly and find more banger ads, more winning ads. The downside here is you are going to spend money on your losing ads, which leads me to play two, which is the one you run and we see run roughly 35% of the time. So play 1 and 2 are like 85% of the time. Play 2 is just one testing and scaling campaign that is either an Advantage Plus Shopping campaign or a CBO, and it has one winner's ad set with every winning ad ever post ID, and then you launch creative tests frequently, 3 times a week, or frequently for you, whatever frequently means to you. You launch creative tests as frequently as you can. And again, you just launch new ad sets into that one campaign with dynamic creatives, and you theme those creatives that are inside those DCTs. So that's kind of play 2. The core principle here is that you launch your creative tests alongside your winners. So in that ASC campaign or that CBO, it is going to decide across those ad sets between your winning creatives and your tests, where should we spend money? You launch the creative tests alongside the winners, and you don't force spend to them, and you hedge your bet, right? So that if they're not good, then you won't spend money on it. And it does, it works okay. The upside here is that you get confident spend and you don't spend as much on losers. The downside is over time, that campaign will basically not spend money on new tests anymore. Tests will not get spend. Even if you launch a new banger ad, it will get $15 of spend in 2 weeks or something like that. And you'll never know that it was a banger. So that's play 2. Plays 3 through 5. The most common use cases of plays 3 through 5, I'm not going to, I don't know if there's 5. There might only be 4, honestly. The most common is like if you're drop brand. So you're a brand that drops new product, runs out of stock quickly, drops new product, runs out of stock quickly. That's kind of the most common other play. And then everything else is kind of like a 1 or 2% fringe case. The most common is like targeting, so a lot of times targeting is just working a lot better than broad targeting in an ad account. So targeting audiences, lookalikes, things like that is just working a lot better than broad. So those are the most common fringe cases. But, if you think you're in play 3 through 5, if you don't think 1 or 2 applies to you, you might be right or you might be wrong, but most likely you have some kind of wrinkle in your business that is just like not broadly applicable. I wouldn't be able to address that on like a webinar like this. You could ask a question in the chat, or you can book a call with us after or whatever, but you have some sort of wrinkle like at a business level that's a little bit abnormal, if you think you one of those plays.
Cool. Creatives and what is working and not. I mean, everything technically works. That's the main theme here of the whole presentation across a broad enough
everything
data
works
set.
and nothing works and nothing is real.
Yeah, across the data set that we see everything. So go ahead.
There you go.
Okay, so what am I seeing? So this is good news, honestly. And the fact is that I'm seeing statics really perform well across multiple brand categories. I know video and UGC was like all the rage, and people were saying, do UGC, do more video. But I'm just seeing that the brands that can leverage static correctly are the ones that are actually growing. Like I'm seeing video perform for problem-solving products, for example. But for normal, let's say clothing, apparel, and jewelry, I'm seeing that just beautiful product shots that show the product in all its glory and obviously staying within your brand guidelines are doing just great. And obviously, we do hear this theme. So we hear about UGC and video, and we also hear about you should be running more ugly slash natural feed ads that kind of blend in with the organic content. But I just don't see this trend in, let's say, the jewelry, clothing, um, in those spaces, because typically in those spaces you do want to show the product again in all its glory. You do want to emphasize the beauty of the product, maybe by putting in a beautiful setting or just having some nice background to it. Where I do see this ugly ads approach, more UGC, more video working, is for problem solving products, beauty supplements, anything where you can create a story arc around it. So this is a problem that I had, this is how this product solves it, and this is how I am now. But in the absence of a story arc, typically a static can do the job. Now, you still see static ads perform incredibly well across problem-solving product categories if you can articulate not only the problem that you solve, but also how the product solves it within the same image. So for problem-solving products, especially those that are a bit bootstrapped or that are they don't have a huge budget for UGC or video, I'd give them a try. I'd for sure give static a try, because I've also seen problem-solving products that start relying on static, scale them, and also scale it from resource perspective, in the sense that once you learn from a business perspective, from an organizational perspective, how to create solid static, it's a function that is easy to scale in the organization, because you just need maybe somebody that's quite skilled at graphic design, and you can have that one person churning out static at really high volume, as compared to, for example, when you need, as compared to like video or UGC, where you need, a videographer, you need maybe an actor, you need a couple more elements to make it work. Now, I wanted to show you, if you go to the next slide, John, examples of what I mean. So when it comes to the beautiful product photography while staying on brand, these are all brands that the imagery is, yeah, it's very on brand. Like, for example, this watch brand at the beginning, they sell watches and jewelry made from natural materials, so like wooden watches. So they'll have a lot of statics placing the product in nature. The same with, for example, the one to the right, so the a modern heirloom never to take off. They make sure with the imagery that they convey that obviously they're a more premium, high quality brand. Oh, and with the short static, for example, we're seeing that it's obviously, this is a product that's not so much in the premium range, but still very good quality. They want to for sure hammer the point home that you can get a good short at a good price with the brand. So again, it's just showing the product in all its glory with a very simple image, but obviously staying on brand. And at the bottom, we do have these statics that are for more problem-solving products. So as long as you can sell more or less the result with the static image, it kind of has a very similar effect. So you can see, for example, with the one at the bottom, with 61% of people are mouth breathers, you have the product, basically the same principle, the product in all its glory, how it's applied, and then the main benefits around it. And I found that brands that can manage to articulate that by imagery obviously find it easier to scale imagery than scaling video or other more resource heavy asset types. So yeah, main takeaway is when it comes to statics versus videos versus UGC, statics are killing it just fine, even though everybody's preaching UGC and video. And when it comes to ugly ads versus, let's say, more polished ads, if you have a brand that that has a certain aesthetic, I would stick to that aesthetic and obviously accentuate it as much as possible throughout your product, especially again if you are in the wearables niche.
You don't sleep on statics. All right. Let's talk
Yep.
about quote unquote other channels. Non-Google and Meta channels.
Oh,
Oh, sorry.
or
I think that's you.
yeah, that's me again.
Yep. Back to you.
Is it
A
me?
double Alejandro.
Double
The
me.
double dose. The double shot.
So should you diversify your spend? Actually, that's what the original title of the slide was called. So you diversify your spend, but I actually broke it out and said, should you diversify your top of funnel spend? Because that's what we usually mean when we mean diversification. Because it's not like you're going to diversify away from Google into Bing. There's no diversification within demand capture. It's mostly happening at the top of funnel level. So I actually had a talk with a client about this today. Most clients should not diversify, or most businesses, not clients, should not diversify the top of funnel spend. It's best to focus on Meta simply because, especially when you're under 50 million, or let's say any yeah, under 50 and like around 30 to 50, you typically have more audience to tap in within Meta. And most of the brands that want to diversify, the intention is not that Meta, like I said, the intention is more to try and like find new pockets of people. But unless you've tapped out Meta, there's no reason to go into other brands that are other channels that are bound to perform less, because very few brands have actually tapped out Meta. And when they do want to diversify, I've seen that people want to diversify as a hedge against not knowing what to do on Meta. So they're stuck on Meta, and then they get this wonderful idea to go and try out a new channel. But then the brand is spending, I don't know, 20K a month to 30K a month on Meta, and that's it. And they think they're tapped out. Like
Hmm.
there's no tapping out on Meta at that level of spend. Like you can easily reach 50 million just on Meta. So when it comes to diversifying your spend, really ask yourself the question like, do I want to diversify my spend because I have a solid hypothesis for why this channel will work for the brand? Or do I just not see good results on Meta and I'm hedging out of Meta? Because if it's just a hedge out of Meta, your best bet is to go back into Meta and try to fix it than to go into another channel to try to make up for the loss of performance in Meta, because no channel will deliver that same performance at scale from what I've seen. Now, with the other channels that are more or less working, TikTok is the only one that I see on a paid level that's actually delivering the ROI that you would kind of expect from Meta as well. So it kind of is on par. But again, before you go into TikTok, there's not only the budget consideration, but also like the mental slash resource consideration of it. It is incredibly resource heavy. Like you need somebody that is really good at it. You need to be outputting a whole lot more creative. If your creative testing is bad in Meta, like you won't be able to mostly pull it off inside of TikTok because you need volume that probably requires a small mini team just for that. So that's a very important consideration to have. You can't just take what's working on Meta and replicate it on TikTok. Although you could take what's working on TikTok and maybe replicate it on Meta, the inverse is usually not true. And now with other channels like Snapchat, Twitter, and Pinterest, I have not seen any brand scale them significantly. And when they do have them, they more or less just have them all combined. It's just diversify their top of funnel spend. But that's when they're like already again at the 50 to 100 million range. I don't see any
Yeah.
small brand making any of these channels work, unless,
That's
of
true
course,
across all of our triple whale data as well.
yeah. Now, the one caveat to this is you could potentially run TikTok spend, or you could start on TikTok if you are already good at running organic TikTok. Like Meta, you can be good at paid Meta, while being very bad at organic Meta. But you cannot typically be good at paid TikTok without being good at organic TikTok. So if you already have a strong following on TikTok and you're good at making content and you know how to make content that sticks, then usually if you layer the paid on top of that, then that could potentially work. So if you are thinking about going into TikTok, start by getting a solid organic approach first and then layer on the paid, because
Yeah.
that's the brands that take off within TikTok typically have that dialed down. So,
And
and
I would
then
also say that this is also separate from like using affiliates, like using TikTok Shop and affiliates as well. This is your paid, like your paid budget, not necessarily your affiliate budget. Go ahead. Sorry.
yeah, and then the best diversifier spend that I've seen is honestly Google Performance Max. Like Google is usually touted as a demand capture platform. But Performance Max has been, I mean, from what we're seeing, constantly over delivers on net new prospecting. Like it's a great play for just going and finding you net new customers. You can't scale it like you do on Facebook, where you just give it money and it'll find you like you can just scale it linearly as Facebook. It is a more of a slower scale, but as a if you are thinking of diversifying your spend from Meta, then the first place I would look is Google Performance Max because the efficiency's there. Google does have the data set, and I just see brands scaling it as well in combination with Meta. So you can have your Google branded slash demand capture side of Google, and you can also have your prospecting demand, I guess, channeling side of Google as well. So that would be how I would diversify.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
Cool. Let's talk about, speaking of PMAX. I didn't even do that on purpose. That just happened.
There you
Speaking of
go.
PMAX, one of the myths that I've been hearing lately is like, oh, PMAX isn't good. Like you got to do manual shopping, take more control. Basically, the case against Google Performance Max is that it's a black box, right? If you don't know about the black box concept, it's right there in that picture. Input is put into a black box. You don't see what happens, and then output comes out, and you can't really. It's hard to optimize it, right? So, what if you launch a PMAX campaign and it's not working? What do you really do about that? It's hard to right direction it. It kind of either works or it doesn't. The other thing, other criticism I hear of PMAX is that there's a scaling cliff. So, right, like it will work, it will work, it will work. You'll scale it up, and then it'll just like fall off a cliff, and every dollar you put into it for more scale won't really convert into more dollars. And these are actually all, I've found these all to be true. So, is PMAX all of these things? Yes, that is not a myth. However, the reality is across, all the calls that we do per week with new brands, there are very few using manual shopping. The ones that are using manual shopping are not getting great performance with it, right? So I'm just telling you, double clicking into the Google ad accounts of a lot of brands every single week. Not a lot of manual shopping going on, and the manual shopping that is going on just isn't really doing that well. It'll be running, and there will be a PMAX running, and the PMAX will just be crushing it on all accounts, new customer acquisition, it just everything, new visitors, all of it. So yeah, while there is a scaling cliff and while there's a black box, at the end of the day, like we got to hit our numbers, right? So most, most most brands are not in a position to just reject a campaign on principle. The principle that it's a black box and I can't optimize it is going to keep me away from PMAX. Most of us don't have that luxury. I would say like maybe none of us have that luxury if we're performance oriented at all. And that's tough. That is what ages us, like this guy, the 29-year-old e-commerce marketer here. But that's what it is. Like you got to hit your numbers. So you run PMAX. That's, that's kind of it, really. Cost caps. So according to some people, if you're a Twitter or if you're on D2C Twitter, e-commerce Twitter, the cost caps seem to be just like the end all be all for your business. It's the cure to world hunger. It's the holy gospel. So the logic here is that you launch tons of ads. There is no limit to the amount of creative you can launch. You just launch new creative, launch. You put everything on a cost cap, right? So if you can afford a $35 CPA, you put a $35 cost cap on everything you launch, and you just launch. And if they don't deliver, that means they're not good enough, because spend is meritocracy on the platform. So, if the ads are good, then they'll spend, and they'll spend under your cost cap. That's the logic of this approach. Here's why it sounds so good, and like it's like, okay, all I have to do is make ads, launch ads. It like really simplifies the process to something that's very actionable. And the thing is, like, as humans, that's comforting. So to think that we can have like take action and have some kind of control over the outcome is comforting. So to just be like, oh, the action is just input, make lots of ads and launch them. The problem with that is that it's only giving you one optimization lever. And that's really like, while it might seem freeing because, or it might seem comforting, it's also very confining, right? Because you can't do anything other than just make ads, launch ads. And what if none of your ads ever deliver? That happens all the time. That's basically the main problem with this cost caps theory, is that you can launch 100. How many are you going to launch? 100, 200, 500, 5,000? What if none of them deliver? And that's that. Like, I've seen brands launch ads for weeks and weeks and weeks and months even on this, and just not really get any delivery on their new tests. So what I will say about really any advice that you give, or any advice that you get, including the advice you're getting from us right now, is note your sources. Who benefits from something that is simple and distills media buying down to one thing? Typically, that's it. I'm just going to leave that there. Who benefits from that, right? If we can just distill it to output and only have one optimization lever, and then all we have to use humans for are to just take ads and upload them. Those humans don't need to be, have any kind of media buying skill at all. Who benefits from that, right? And also, I would also avoid dogma when you're, looking at any kind of information. Like, the biggest thing I've found from taking as many calls as we've taken, and as many calls as I've taken over the years and working with as many brands, is like, there's always exceptions to the rule. So people are just absolutely dogmatic about something, like cost caps always, forever. I will ride cost caps until I die. It's just too dogmatic. And there's no hard and fast rules that work every single time. The reality here, if I'm, am I busting or confirming this myth? I'm not saying it doesn't work. I am saying that I've never seen it really work. I've never not once seen it really working at scale for a brand. And you can chime in too, Alejandro. I don't know if you've seen it, but like working at scale where they really are spending, $100,000 or $200,000 a month using this method. I have never once seen that. And I've seen a lot of brands, and very few are using cost caps.
I also, I've seen one case, like not to its scale. I just don't see the prevalence of it. Like you hear about it so much that one would assume that they're everywhere, but I rarely see them. Like, and again, we look at combined, me and John look at around 25 to 30 brands per week, both of us, different ones. And it's just not what we see. Again, maybe the cost cap people are looking at other brands, but it's just not prevalent.
I do use manual bidding. I use cost cap bidding and I use manual bidding on my own brand, but not when I'm testing.
Yeah.
Right. So I use it to scale. I might launch an ad set with like a super high budget, $10,000 a day, but a really tight bid so that, it'll only spend or something so like, that's how I use it. Like, I'm not saying there's no place for manual bidding. I'm just saying that this idea of like all cost caps in the whole account always, and we're dogmatic about it. I don't know. We got a lot of data, and this is just not what we're seeing. So we're not making the news. We're just reporting the news.
Yeah.
All right.
We don't pretend to know how it works either.
Yeah. So struggling brands could benefit. So if I'm going to try and make the case for it, a struggling brand could benefit from this because they wouldn't spend on, on ads that weren't going to hit the bid as much. But if that's the case and none of your ads ever spent, like, you kind of have different problems. You got bigger fish to fry, honestly. So yeah, I mean, scale is very difficult. It also, creates logistics problems, because basically the thought here is that instead of performance, when there's a performance dip, you run a Facebook ads, sometimes there's a performance dip and things aren't going as well. The idea behind cost caps is, well, there won't be a performance dip. There will just be a spend dip. Yeah, but what happens when you just placed a big order on net 90 and you got to pay that off? Like, how do you do any kind of demand planning? How do you know how many people to hire in your warehouse if you have a warehouse? Like, it's just, it creates a lot of logistical problems when at any point you could basically scale back to zero. So if you're the kind of brand who could scale down to zero, scale up, scale down as much as you need to, then I guess it could work. But I think it creates a lot of logistical problems if you're not that kind of brand. All right. Basically, yeah, I forgot I had this summary slide. Not saying it doesn't work, but there are some circumstances I'd recommend it. But I would say for the most part, this is like not like, people are posting this as broad advice. This is not broad advice. This is like edge cases where I would recommend this.
It is the loudest voice, and that's also, we see the inverse with, for example, ASC. Like, for the amount of for the performance that we're seeing in ASC, it should be getting more talk. And it's getting less.
Right. Yeah.
Um, yeah,
Yeah. Well, because it's what do you that ASC is the performance max of Facebook ads. It's black.
yeah,
It's like you just start it and it goes like there's not, it's not impressive, honestly.
no,
If you're trying to write case studies to get clients or something like that. Uh,
no.
so okay, let's talk about one other thing. This is sort of like a little bonus tip that I'll say, and of course, this is kind of benefits us. But anyone who takes anything seriously gets a coach, from beginner to world class. So think about the thing, if you're like, some people have a music background, some people have a sports background. Most people have done some kind of thing that they've been like either competitive in or they've gotten really good at. In almost always, like if I wanted to go play tennis and learn tennis, like I would get a coach, even though I'm a beginner. Like, Peja Stojakovic or whatever his name is, or Andy Roddick, or Andy Roddick's old. I don't know. I don't know very many tennis players. You gotta help me out here. Um,
Mhm.
but like they all have coaches, right? Like professional tennis players have coaches. So that's another thing I've seen is that typically brands have some kind of outside influence. That could be us. Sometimes it is like just a third party consultant. Sometimes it's agencies, whatever it is. But they have like outside eyes on the business. That's a very common thing. So one problem with that is coaching is expensive typically, right? Like if you go hire a business coach, it's like, yeah, pay me 15 grand a month. Um, Alejandro and I are not that expensive if you want to do coaching with us. Uh, our idea here is that we want to provide asymmetric upside, right? So we want to minimize the risk. If you want to work with us, we want to minimize the risk, make it very accessible, not make it cost very much for you, but maximize the upside. If we have one high impact idea, or if we make 1% change in your business, per week, or if we have like, even if that doesn't happen, the risk is really low. But if there's one high impact idea that makes a 15 or 25% change in your business, that can mean hundreds of thousands of dollars or millions of dollars or however much 15 to 25% is for your business. So, yeah, this is, if you can't tell, this is the part where we're telling you about working with us on an ongoing basis.
Yes. And why would you want to talk to us and what makes us different? I mean, there's a lot of talented people in D2C, like really talented people that they just know a whole lot. Um, but the thing that makes us unique, to be honest, is we just have a lot of data that when you combine it with our industry experience, just gives us an edge. Like we see, again, 25 to 30 different brands, and we're in no way incentivized to tell you this or that. We're basically on riding the wave of whatever's happening, and we're pretty close. So whatever brand you have or whatever industry you're in, we probably have the top players in your space too, and we can just see what's working across many industries. So that that's just what gives us the edge. So when you do book a call with us, which is free, the first one, you either walk away with a clear path forward based on not only our experience but everything that we're seeing across the board, or you walk away with a partner to help you grow your brand. Either way, you win.
Yep. All right, so there's QR code. I'm putting the cost right there. Depending, I mean, it's pretty accessible, right? Like most of y'all are spending, I don't know, 5,000 a month, 10,000 a month, all the way up to 100,000, $500,000 a month on ads. So it's pretty. We try to make it pretty accessible, pretty easy, pretty simple. We just get on calls with you, depending on how often and how long you want to get on calls. It's like 250,000 or $250 to $1,000 a month. 250,000 is what I almost said.
Jesus.
250 to that. We raised the price. 250 to $1,000 a month. There's a QR code for a free call, so that will just bring you to a landing page where you can book a free call. I think Danielle or someone can probably put something in the chat right now, a link in the chat right now, also where you can book a free call as well. So
Yes.
do that. Hope to see y'all on a free call at least. Um, and if it makes sense, we can work together ongoing. All right, Alejandro, let's get to some questions.
Q&A. So, what's the difference between, oh, you want to pull it up?
Yeah, I can go back. I can there wasn't too many, so I can probably go back.
Oh, what's it?
Um
Okay, let me know.
yeah, so what is the difference? The question was, what's the difference between Advantage Plus shopping and just using broad in a CBO or an ABO in a campaign budget optimization campaign or an ad set budget optimization campaign? So his question is basically, what's the difference between using ASC, Advantage Plus Shopping, and just targeting broad audiences?
Okay, so again, the thing with all these technologies is that nobody really knows the full truth. If we did, we'd all be rich. So this is what I've seen and what I understand from this. Even though the principle is the same, where they're going after broad audiences, the technology that ASC uses is more primed and is better at finding you people that are in market for whatever it is that you are selling. So it's really good
Yeah.
at finding already existing demand for whatever it is that you are selling, which is why you will see a little bit of retargeting inside of ASC, but it's just something about the way Facebook finds you the customers. Just I don't know how to explain it, John, but it's like
Yeah,
it's just more
I can
efficient.
explain it. I can explain it like this. Most of how we think of Facebook and Meta advertising is what we would call demand generation, meaning we're meeting people who are maybe problem aware or, kind of unaware or whatever. They're not really in market, and we're getting an ad in front of them and getting an opportunity to, educate them on a product and sell them on a product and stuff like that. But there are a lot of people out there who are semi in market. So why Advantage Plus Shopping works so well for jewelry, clothing, or anything else, or accessories, or anything else that is multi SKU, like many SKUs, is because there's a lot of people who are in market for that stuff. So if you think about it, like here's all the people who are, actively shopping and actively buying that kind of stuff, and here's all the products that the brand has that you have, right? Really, all you need is just to get the right product in front of the right person. There's just not a lot of mechanisms to do that outside of if they're actually actively like on Google shopping for it. So Performance Max just does that really well. And then you also add your static creatives and your video creatives into it. And you kind of get like it just gives Facebook all the data it needs to just put the products in front of the people who are already in market. So I would almost say what it does is it allows you to do demand capture on Facebook,
Mhm.
but cold audiences with people you haven't already, that aren't retargeting. And that's why it's so effective. The other thing that I will say about it is anytime you're on an advertising platform, you, and this isn't always true of Meta, but when they crack a feature, right? So sometimes they want you to use features and the features suck, right? They want you to do, like years ago, they wanted you to use all placements. All placements sucked, right? Now it works really well, right? So usually they're trying to crack that feature. That's why they want you to use it. Once they crack it, your campaigns will almost always perform better if you use that, and you'll usually pay like a tax if you don't use that. So now if you go into Facebook ads and you don't use all placements, my theory is that you pay a tax for that. Like everything's a little more expensive because of that. So it's the same kind of thing. Advantage Plus Shopping has kind of been cracked. They figured it out. And so it's like you kind of get a little bit of a performance bump for using it.
Yeah.
All right. Next
Thank you, John.
question was, hopefully that answered your question, Ryan. Next question was, scrolling through here.
Recording of this call be available?
Yeah.
Yes.
So Ace asked, when we're talking about platform diversification, are you using other platforms besides Google and Meta? What about platform risk, short-term or long-term, when it comes to diversification?
Define platform risk. That's what I'm mostly concerned with the question. Is it platform risk in the sense like the platform will in some way maybe be banned? No, I'm just talking. Maybe be obsolete or will stop working,
Mhm.
or just that you tap out. I don't think there's any platform risk inherent in any platform. I mean TikTok obviously, but when it comes to Facebook, I don't think there's any risk in being invested into it. The risk comes with being too reliant on paid marketing in general. So there's no platform risk. There's the way you grow your business risk. So if you're reliant on paid marketing and that's the only way you get new customers and that's the only way you're thinking of growing your brand over a long enough time horizon, that does pose a risk. And that's the only risk that I see essentially.
Yeah.
I don't see any individual platform risk. I just see an over reliance on paid and not enough work on retention slash maybe some organic to be the biggest risk.
So I think that there's this, that, what this reminds me of is like, this is these are the stories we hear, right? So a few years ago, by a few, I mean, probably when you were like less than 10 years old, Alejandro, uh, maybe probably like 2010 now. Like I said a few years ago, and I'm like, no, like 15, 14, 15 years ago, you used to be able to make a themed page on Facebook and grow it, and it would get reach, right? So you could make like a meme page or whatever, and you could grow it and it would get reach, and then you could post products on there and all your posts would get reach. And Facebook was this platform that wasn't algorithmic, and it just showed posts to your followers, all your followers. And so you could just grow it up like that. And then you could post products, post t-shirts, whatever. And a lot of businesses like built like that and actually did really well like that. And then, Facebook changed its whole organic algorithm, and many of those businesses just simply are not businesses anymore because they were built on that. I would say my question is, are you building a business? So if you're asking about platform risk, and I'm using an extreme example, that one, right? So I get that that's an extreme example, but those are the stories that make us worry about platform risk. So if you're asking about platform risk, my question is, are you building a business or are you building a money-making hack? Because if it's a money-making hack, then yes, it's going to come with risk, but you should just be aware of what it is and grab as much of that cash as you can. If you're building an actual business, then yes, you do need to maybe de-risk. Maybe you do need to diversify, spend a little bit. But here's the thing. If you're diversifying because what if Facebook ads stop performing well, diversifying to Pinterest and Twitter and TikTok, that's not really going to help you in that, because they're just not going to get nearly as much scale and they're not going to perform that well. If you're, or what if Facebook changes the whole thing, and, what if Facebook ads went away tomorrow? I need to be de-risked and be on these platforms. They wouldn't save your business, or your business would run on a much smaller level. Like if it's here now, it'd be down here. I think Google and Facebook is about the most, diverse we're going to get. After that, you have to ask yourself about just other strategies and other distribution and lifetime value, right? Are we gaining customers that are, and building products and creating products that people are going to buy over and over again? If that's the case, then that's your de-risker. If we're not, some products just inherently aren't like that. One I always use as an example is like CrossNet, or something like that. Then distribution, right? Like, are you distributing it into retail? Are you on Amazon? Are you using any other strategies are you making organic content and building an organic presence? Are you using any kind of seeding strategies with influencers? Like, that's where I think once you're on Facebook and Google, it might make sense to chase something that could be trending, like TikTok shops and using TikTok affiliates. Like, I think that maybe makes a little bit of sense. But outside of that, I don't think that, none of those other things are really de-risking you is the problem, right? So it's not really a diversifier.
Yeah, and Peter asks, what about changes in algorithms? Ultimately, I think if we look back, there's always going to be changes that might disrupt performance over the short term, but over the long term, like, I don't think there's going to be any changes that will disrupt performance to the point where advertising on Facebook is not going to be viable. Like,
And
the only thing that might change is, and the only thing that's actually impacted performance over the long term is just the fact that there's just way more advertisers bidding for the same space. But Facebook will always find ways to either create new space or optimize the current space. And that's mostly what has changed, not so much the algorithms themselves. And if anything, the algorithms are going to get better, as shown with ASC. Like, if
yeah,
ASC existed when like back in the day when Facebook ads was a thing, like when it was super cheap, then brands would have scaled even higher. So if anything, the algorithms are actually getting better.
yeah, and I would say, like, I understand that, but, like, again, like, if the algorithm changes and performance dips, and you're like, well, it's a good thing we're on TikTok, we're running ads on TikTok and Snapchat. Like, they're not really making up the difference, and also they're not performing as well as Facebook most of the time. They're way more destabilized, and they're way lower scale. So you're still pretty, you're still pretty pot committed to Meta. Um, as much as people complain about it, right? Like, oh man, algorithm, like our performance is dipped and stuff like that. The dollars don't move away. And if
Yeah,
the dollar and if there was something, if there was a viable alternative on TikTok or something like that, the dollars would just move away, but they never do. So even when performance dips on Meta so far, that's still the best place to keep your dollars. Google has taken some of the dollars in like some years. But to also answer that question, like that's happened to a lot of businesses. There's a lot of businesses that launched in 2020 that like just couldn't really could only handle really great acquisition costs on Meta. That was the only way they could make money. Or that launched in the drop shipping era that could only handle great acquisition costs on Meta, and they couldn't really make money. So again, is it a money making hack, or is it a business? Just be aware. I mean, I'm not against money making hacks. I love money, but if that's the case, if you're just finding an arbitrage opportunity, then that's not necessarily the same. What else we got? Oh, I think I see one, Danielle. I don't know if there's one besides this one.
Do cost caps make sense for launching a new product / offer?
Yeah.
There you go.
You want to go first?
I think you're the cost caps guy, man. I want to hear your take on this.
I think that, in the way that they're preached, where it's like, just put your cost cap at whatever you can afford. I mean, you could launch a new product that way and I guess sleep easier at night, knowing that Meta's not going to spend money if it can't hit your cost cap. But most likely what's going to happen is it's just not going to spend money. I don't know. I've seen some brands try and launch this way, and it just usually just doesn't spend money. So, I mean, you could always increase the cost cap and run like, instead of, if it's a $30 target CPA, you could run like a $60 cost cap or whatever. But then I ask, like, what's the point of that? Like, just spend some money and launch it and figure out if you've got something. If you got a great product and great creative to communicate it, like, just get it out there. Have some conviction is my mindset on it. Do you want to add anything?
Nope. I think that's pretty good.
I think that's the questions. I think that's the Q&A. Unless somebody else, if anyone else has anything. Yeah, but hit the QR code, hit the link in the chat, book a call with us. Definitely if you have any other questions, we can answer those there. Yeah, if you're gonna post something on Twitter, Ace, tag me at John JH Coyle. Just a little plug, shameless plug for my Twitter handle. But yeah, no, definitely book a call with us. We'd love to talk to you. Appreciate all you showing up, learning and staying to the end. And I think that's it. Alejandro, anything you want to say to the people? You want to say goodbye?
I want to say goodbye and thank you for this. Thank you for coming, and let us know if you'd want to have at least one of these sessions a month. We'd be really down to bust some myths.
Yeah,
with you guys.
for sure. All right. I think that's the Webby.